Hey guys, what's going on? Kuyo here. And today I want to talk about something that I've never really taken the time to talk about. Non-canonical Elder Scrolls lore, or as many people refer to it as, Coda. Now, Coda is, as I just implied, a non-canon thing, meaning that most of the stuff that happens in it, and pretty much all of the stuff that happens in it, will never be a part of the actual Elder Scrolls lore. However, that doesn't mean that Bethesda won't pull from it, and as a result, I enjoy covering that topic. But I've never taken the time to preface it, kind of explain what it is. So, in this video, I think I'll do just that. Explain not only how Coda came to be, but also what it is, a short sort of summary to it, and a little bit of a send-off to the next video, preparing anyone who wants to keep going into this channel for topics that may at first seem a bit too complex. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. Now to start this video, I'm going to preface everything by saying that none of the stuff said here is canon, as Coda is just that, it's fanfic. And being fanfic, it also suffers from a lot of the same things that fanfics suffer from. Most keenly, the fact that everything is interpretive. So please, take note of that when listening to the rest of the video. And with all of that out of the way, we can jump into the important questions. The first of which is, who the hell is Michael Kirkbride? Well, Michael Kirkbride was actually a writer. I know, crazy, right? A writer working at Bethesda. But Michael Kirkbride was a writer that worked at Bethesda. And basically, he was on a bunch of games, most keenly Morrowind and Oblivion. Now, he kind of left with Oblivion, but the fact is that during his time at Bethesda, he wrote a lot of stuff that wasn't added into the games. And after he was kind of fired, I don't know if he quit or whatever, I haven't actually researched that. But once Michael Kirkbride left Bethesda, he decided a few years later to publish what would become known as Coda, which was basically a collection of writings that he made from 5th era Tamriel. Now, there's a lot of stigma involving Michael Kirkbride, mostly because a lot of his writings are in a state of limbo. Not only do they typically not make sense, but they've also had a lot of bearing on the writing of Elder Scrolls in general. In fact, one of the reasons he may have left was the refusal of Bethesda in accepting that fans could make their own canon. Now that was actually one of Michael Kirkbride's main points in releasing Coda, in that he wanted whoever read it to interpret it however they wanted, hence the reason why it is written so strangely. Though it also may be attributed to the fact that Michael Kirkbride did take drugs during some of his writing sessions, which is probably most keenly noted in the 36 Lessons. Though the one key thing about Michael Kirkbride's writing is that it still belongs to Bethesda. And as such, Bethesda can use all of his writings as much as they want and how little they want. Now, for the community, this has led to a lot of issues. Like, some people think, oh, Coda is perfectly canon because Elder Scrolls canon is determined by the fans. But Bethesda didn't like that, and technically, they still won't ever like that, because that allows for people to basically tell them that their games are wrong. But for Bethesda, the writings of Michael Kirkbride are very important to them, since they don't actually have any hired writers. Now, they do have quest writers who kind of switch between writing the stories and writing for the quests, especially side quests in games. But they mainly take their information from Coda and any of the stray writings of Michael Kirkbride. And with that, like I said earlier, it's in a state of limbo, where everything is and is not. Hence the reason why I make so many Coda videos on this channel, since if some of the stuff in Coda is right, it'll become canon. And if it's not, it'll be thrown out like the fanfic it is. Or will it? And now that you guys know who the hell Michael Kirkbride is and his implications on the Elder Scrolls universe, we can go ahead and jump into Coda. And I'd like to go through this systematically, in which I'll first talk about the Godhead, then Lorcan, then Vivek, and so forth and so on. And as such, the first thing on our list is of course the Godhead. Now, I did do a video on the Godhead previously, but at this point it's kind of outdated. But in general, the Godhead is the idea that the Elder Scrolls universe is a dream, and that it's a dream inside of a giant head, which is referred to as the Godhead. Now, this Godhead is probably Michael Kirkbride, since he is the one who believes that he imagined up the universe. But that's besides the point. Now, the concept of the Godhead kind of brings with it something called the Amaranth, which is basically the idea that the Godhead itself can materialize within the dream. Kind of how like a dreamer would see themselves inside their own dream, and see themselves experiencing that dream. And as such, the Amaranth has all the powers of the Godhead, however, it lacks any sort of physical connections to anything anymore. It becomes the Godhead, it becomes the dreamer, and it no longer is itself. Now, in the Elder Scrolls universe, we've only had one confirmed Amaranth, which was Anu. And I did explain the process of this in my Amaranth video, but in general, Anu became the Godhead because of the fact that he mourned greatly. Now that's simplifying it a lot, but it kind of gets across the point in which the Amaranth needs to experience something that is so emotionally captivating, or so emotionally damaging, that it kind of brings them into a state of sensory deprivation, in which they can't feel, they can't care, and they honestly don't know if they exist anymore. Though a caveat of this is that it only happens to people who have achieved Chim, meaning that a person needs to realize that they are a part of the dream, which is essentially what achieving Chim is, where you believe that you're a part of the dream, but you refuse to accept the reality that everything is predestined for you. And that, I think, is where the idea of Amaranthood comes into place. Where, in my opinion, it's basically overriding the will of the Godhead itself within the dream, so that you no longer have to abide by some random head-in-the-skies dreams. That you no longer have to abide by its will, and that perhaps everything in the Elder Scrolls universe is now underneath a will that is, perhaps, free. But that's getting a bit too advanced for this conversation. And basically, the Godhead is just that. It's a giant head in the sky, just making the world as it dreams. Now, this is essential to Michael Kirkbride's narrative, because from here, the death of Nier, which was the center spirit between Sithis and Anu, was what resulted in Anu becoming the way he was, the Amaranth. And eventually, as time went on, Aetherius was created, which is what happened when Anu became the Amaranth. But Sithis, being the jealous little guy he is, decided to send down an agent. This agent was, of course, Lorcan. And Lorcan's whole point of existing was to return everything to the Void. And so, what Lorcan tried to do was trick the other spirits into pouring all their power into a single vessel. And that vessel was, of course, Mundus. But in the process, he began to learn things. And like I said in the Amaranth video I did earlier, he fell in love with the world. And as time went on, he discovered some very, very dark things. These dark things were, of course, the fact that the world was always predestined, and that everything was already decided by some giant head in the sky. But upon discovering this, and potentially trying to alleviate it, Lorcan was cut down by his brethren, and for fair reasoning too, because he had tricked all of them into basically weakening themselves so that they might be reclaimed by the Void. Now, this is also where things start to go wrong. In an attempt to circumvent the weakness that was given to the gods by the creation of Mundus, Akatosh, who is technically the lead Aedra, created what is known today as the Kalpic Cycle, in which the world essentially rewinds whenever the time comes. But the thing about the Kalpic Cycle is that it prevents anyone from breaking from their destiny. It prevents everything that is meant to break this false world from happening. And this is where Lorcan's mission or quest comes into play. Now, Lorcan kind of resurrected as multiple gods throughout the world, most keenly Shor. And as we learn from a bunch of the Coda writings, specifically Shor, son of Shor, Shor is trying to break the cycle. He's trying to create a new Amaranth in general. He wants to make it so that his will can re-imprint onto the Amaranth's own will, making it so that everyone is free from the pursuit of the Godhead, that the world is free to do what it wishes. And as such, it kind of comes into perspective of how he created Mundus, a world where anyone can become someone with Chim, and how anyone can become a new Amaranth. Though in MK's universe and the current canonical Elder Scrolls universe, a new Amaranth has not yet come to be. There could be many reasons for it, but as of current, we don't really know. However, for now, we have two candidates who qualify for that role. The first, of course, is Talos, and the second is Vivek, both of whom have achieved Chim in some form. Though, per non-canonical lore, Talos doesn't really care about this, since he is Lorcan, and Lorcan's purpose is to create a new Amaranth, and he can't be the Amaranth if he wants others to become the Amaranth and decide the fate of the world themselves. The second candidate, however, is Vivek, and Vivek has done a lot of stuff to try and become the new Amaranth. He even went so far as to build a room in the middle of Orbis to kind of isolate himself from the rest of the universe, trying to achieve Amaranthood there, though he still has yet to find the key to it. And with that, it seems as though Vivek's purpose in life is to become a new Amaranth, or at least as it seems in Coda, to find a new Amaranth. Which is what leads us into our next section, which is, of course, the events of Coda itself. Now, Coda revolves around the idea that the Elder Scrolls universe in the 5th era is completely different than how it was in previous eras, and I do go ahead and explain this in another video of mine. But for time's sake, I'll just say that basically, Lorcan has extreme amounts of influence over Tamriel. And more specifically, every piece of him is so immensely powerful that it can change everything on Mundus. In particular, Lorcan's heart seems to be the one thing that everyone goes after. And for good reasoning, because the heart has so much immense power in it that it can change everything. Now, the heart's power was utilized in 3 different ways. The original was, of course, the god itself, Okulikan, which was the name given to the giant brass god, or brass tower, that was named after Lorcan himself. Essentially a giant behemoth that had the capabilities of Lorcan, but was not him. The second was, of course, in Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, in which we see this giant dwarven construct, imperfect, a mimic to Okulikan, and, as such, a failure, hence the name. The third utilization of the heart was, of course, Numidium, which was actually a brass god. And being the incarnation of Lorcan, working under a heart of someone who would go on to become Talos, it was also immensely powerful. And the thing is that the entirety of Coda revolves around the idea that when Tiber Septim used Numidium, he kinda ended up messing up really bad, because in the end, Numidium kills everything on Nirn. And that is essentially the plot of Coda. Now, because of its prime directive, which is the destruction of all races, everyone is forced to leave the planet of Nirn, and they flee to Masser. And there they just prepare. They prepare to fight this giant brass god. And in time, they do eventually find a way to defeat it. And this defeat is through a very biblical and poetic way, which is through this hero basically using his words to tear apart Numidium. Something that can play back to the whole ideology of Coda, in which someone can use their own will to rewrite destiny. Now, of course, after the events of Coda, well, kind of still in the events of Coda, this hero, alongside Vivek, basically try and fix their mistakes, and through that, they create a new race of men, which is only referred to as the new race of men. And this new race of men is their key to finding a new Amaranth. And in time, the new Amaranth is born, hence fulfilling the prophecy that Vec had been trying to fulfill this entire time. An event which ends up creating a new world because of the Amaranth, and because of it, ends up ending the Elder Scrolls. Or at least, the non-canonical Elder Scrolls. So, I think, or at least I hope now, that it's a little more clear to you what the hell Coda is. Now, I did go a little fast parts, but I was just trying to paraphrase. And in general, Coda is a beast. Coda is a monster that you need to take all your time to understand. And as a result, Coda can have a lot of mixed reactions. Not only is it potentially canon, but it's also not canon. And not only can Bethesda pull the final conclusion of Coda from it, they can also not, and they can just keep relying on their own repetitive stories that they've still been pulling from Michael Kirkbride. But in the end, it doesn't really matter, because Elder Scrolls has always been about choice, and I think that, because of that, Bethesda might just use this. Because free will and choice is everything that Coda is about. It's the idea that we can rewrite our destinies using our own thoughts. We can change everything around us because of that. But once again, that's just my own interpretation, so please don't take this to heart and try and kill me. And I think with that, I'll end it here. For Coda is a work that lies in its own realm. It's obviously going to be influenced by everything, and everything is going to eventually be influenced by it, especially for the Elder Scrolls. But the message that it gives us, and more so, its implications, are always going to last. And for that very reason, Coda may just be remembered by all the people who thought of it as canon, and still love it to this day, because of how creative it is, because of all the ideas that it brings to the table that we haven't seen. But the fact remains, it's all in Michael Kirkbride's head. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this entire idea of Coda as a whole and what it means. And don't forget, like I said earlier, it was all a dream. Kuyo out.
I could eat sweet rolls all my life. That'd be fine with me. I could eat sweet rolls all my life. That'd be fine with me.